Wanted to change my life. Life's too short to do the same thing. Just because you're good at it and you make money at it doesn't mean you got to keep doing it. Try to learn. The one thing, it does bother me though, when students don't take advantage of all the resources and opportunities, like guest speakers that we have and art exhibits or chances to go somewhere else and see how they're doing things. Embrace all that. Don't just go through the motions and get your ticket punched so you can go to work at Megacorp and then too quickly buy a house you shouldn't be buying and 2 new cars and get married, and now you're hooked up forever.
Welcome to Unlocking Moves. We want to cover those key pivotal moments and decision points that really change the lives of successful entrepreneurs and leaders. And I want to hear their stories because I think we learn the most from stories. But I don't want to hear just their glory stories. I want to hear their gory stories because, as I like to say, the bigger the shit show, the bigger the lesson. My guest today is a very successful entrepreneur who has dedicated the next phase of his life to really inspiring and teaching and advising other entrepreneurs to be successful, including his work as an entrepreneur in residence at the University of Arkansas. But Mark, before we get going, you might know that I like to hit my guests up with an off-the-wall question or comment to really keep them on their toes, keep my audience on their toes. You ready for this?
Man. I am.
Okay, so you had a consulting company called the Zweig Group, which you sold twice. Once to private equity, and again, it sounds like an internal succession plan, but that's not my question. My question is this. You have, in addition to selling 2 companies and being on the Inc. 5,500 list 4 times, you are now in the home remodeling business for high-end restoration. What the hell's up with that? That they do not compute in my mind. Tell me about that.
Well, truthfully, we're really phased. I say we phased out of that business, but we're still doing a house down the street. Occasionally one pops up. We just have to do it. But
you don't just have to do it. You don't have to deal with rich people remodeling their kitchen.
Well, mostly what we did, Kurt, very little we did for clients. We usually did it on spec. So you could count on one hand the number of jobs I've done for clients. Clients are a pain in the ass.
Hey, I hear you. That's the worst. The worst part about a consulting business is the freaking clients. So if you could get rid of clients, we're in good shape.
Yeah, but no, I was always interested in that. When I was a little kid, I used to build houses with Legos, and then I would draw the floor plans out on a graph paper with 1 peg equals 1 square. And then I build them. And, I thought I wanted to be an architect when I was a little kid. And, but I started working in bike shops when I was 12 or 13. And I just got to where I made so much money. I was seduced away by the world of business, And so anyway, but it all really came back to full circle. When I got out of grad school, I went to work in a consulting firm that served the real estate development, construction, and architecture and engineering industries. And I gravitated to the architects and engineers, and I spent my whole career, Zweig Group is completely dedicated to that group of clients.
Dude, I can't wait to dive in, man. So, hey, my guest today is Mark Zweig. He is currently an entrepreneur in residence at the University of Arkansas. Been doing that for 20 years, teaching entrepreneurship courses. He's also had a company that was on the Inc. 500 and Inc. 5,000 list 4 times, which, as I said before, he sold twice. And he's also written a book called Confessions of an Entrepreneur, which is pretty salty. I can't wait to dive in with Mark Zweig.
All right. Well, it's great to be here with you, Kurt. You're a successful guy, and I like your style, and I like your writing.
That's one of the things I wanted to comment on, and I was going to save it for when I talked about your book, but let's do that first of all. So either this guy is amazingly humble, or I'm not really sure, but I got a copy of Confessions of an Entrepreneur, which was signed, as you would expect and hope. And it says that while my successes pale in comparison to yours, I hope you find this interesting. Dude, pale in comparison. You were on the Inc. 5,000 list 4 times. Come on, man. Don't super humility my ass.
Well, it's true. I think your business was probably more successful. But anyway, go on.
All right, let's go on. Hey, here's what I want to talk about. As I mentioned in the intro, you sold your company twice. So not a lot of people have done that. So tell me a little bit about the backstory. You sold it to private equity in 2004 or six, I think. And then,
2004.
you bought it back in 2010 and you sold it again. Tell me about that. Because
Yeah.
not many people have that accomplishment on their resume.
Well, it's just a classic story, started out, was unemployed, decided I was doing a great job. I got fired from my job, decided I never wanted to put myself in that position again. And I had a business plan ready to go and started the business in 1988. And in fact, my employer who fired me was one of my first clients. Gave me about half of what I needed to get by. And then my former employer before that was my second client, and then another firm it was my third client there in Boston, and that sort of launched it. And we decided really early on we were going to live dirt cheap and just throw all our money back into the business. And it did. And I was fortunate. I hired a guy who I'd hired at the prior firm that I worked at, named Fred White. He was a brilliant guy. And he had no credentials whatsoever. He graduated from Exeter Academy, went to Penn and dropped out, and then he played in bands and hitchhiked around Europe and worked as a cook at IHOP. And
Sounds like a great partner. You got to tell me more.
even
First of all, I know this is a chapter called "You Got to Hire a Fred" or something like that. So
yeah,
tell me more.
yeah, it sort of sounds like your book. It was sort of a subconscious thing there. But no, Fred was a brilliant guy, and we just decided we were going to grow this company, and we sort of used it as a test lab for things that I was always interested in. I had a human resources background, believe it or not, and so we did things like open book management and paid 25% of the profits out to all employees on a monthly basis. And, strategic planning where all employees are involved regularly, several times a year. And some of those things. And it just grew. It was just like consistently grew. We spent a fortune on direct mail. That was really the key for us.
Okay.
Somewhere between 14 and 16% of revenue on direct mail.
And
Never
just to
made
be,
a sales call.
make sure I got the business right. It was architects and engineers and consultants. Is that right?
It was management consulting for architects and engineers. So our audience was architects and engineers, but we were all about the business. So we did strategic planning, we did executive search, retained, we did marketing, we did appraisal, firm appraisal, evaluation, M&A, basically anything on the business side, financial turnarounds, due diligence assistance, all that.
Which, by the way, I love because most professional service firms are really good at what they do, like in engineering, for example, but they suck at running a business. So what a beautiful business you created.
It was a great, the specialization allowed us to really hone in on our clients. We had a lot of clients, and we sold products. We did original research, newsletters. Our newsletter business was over 7 figures at one point in subscriber income. Research, training, seminars, conferences, awards.
All right.
So
So
all
hey,
that-
let me take you back, Mark, because just a second, I
Yeah.
want to get into the story. You mentioned
Sure.
you hired this Fred guy to basically be your partner, but the way you
Right.
described Fred sounded nothing like a prospective partner for a professional service firm that's going to do hundreds of millions of dollars. So tell me what you saw in Fred and why he was a good partner for you at the time.
Fred was basically the exact opposite of me. So that's sort of it in a nutshell. He did everything I didn't do well, but we both shared this idea we could grow this business. And so that's a great combination. I mean, it doesn't mean you're never going to have friction because we had it at times, but it's a great combination. The worst partners are ones that are just like you, and then you're stepping on each other's toes all day. So
I tell people find somebody who compliments you, and then there's 3 core things that are important to the relationship: trust, respect, and communication. If you've got those
Yep.
3 things, you can accomplish a lot.
it's so true. So, he's just a really extremely intelligent guy who was very methodical. Most people can't do, and you've been in business a long time, and this is true, like long-term initiatives that actually get done and work. It's so rare, but that's the kind of thing that Fred was good at. So he created this fantastic database for us where every single thing we did went into it, every product sold, every contact. You could, print labels, do letters. It was organized by company and then location and then people. So that was also pivotal instead of just people with this other information tied. So we could look at the whole relationship with an organization. And anyway, it was a fantastic thing. It worked very well. We had multiple offices. We were on a wide area network, before you could do everything on the web like today. That was just one of many initiatives that Fred came up with. But so we grew. We just kept spending more money on direct mail, promoted the products. That made the phone ring for consulting. Never made a sales call. Company still doesn't make sales calls. It's 36 years old now. Positioning, PR, lots of press releases, and just a continuous, sustained, relentless, not skipping because of cash problems or somebody's ill or we forgot to do it. That just didn't happen. It was just like a machine. Increased the expenditures every year by 30%, grew by 30% a year. It was so because you had so many independent events that it basically turns into math, providing you can deliver. And
it's kind of like the e-com days today, but you were doing it in a similar fashion. The more we spend, the more revenue we generate, and you knew how the math computed. I like it.
I was taught, in fact, I'm going to see the guy Friday night, who was my professor at Southern Illinois University, marketing professor, a guy named John Summey. And he taught market research, but he really pounded into my head the probability theory. And in fact, he's like 88 years old or something. We're going up there for a board meeting, and I just talked to him today. We're going out to dinner with him.
Hey, tell me more about this. Tell me about that, about what he taught you.
Well, just probability theory. I mean, it's like, do you want to be the gambler where the odds are stacked against you, or do you want to be the casino owner? And I'll go for the casino every time. It's like, that if you do enough things that the probabilities will bear out and you will be successful. It's kind of like, you talked a little bit about that in your book. I think it was Harry was the guy who became the sales manager. He was the superstar salesman.
Harry the hustler. Yep.
Yeah. And didn't necessarily make a great sales manager in your story. And there were other supporting stories about that. But that's what a good sales manager understands. It's like they know if you just make enough calls, spin so many spins of the dial, so many connections, so many meetings, so many proposals that it's going to work out. Unless your technique's horrible. Now, if you do all the numbers, but you still don't get the results, then they go back to the technique. But it's the odds. Make the odds in your favor.
I like that. I love the analogy of be the house or the casino versus being the gambler and just play the odds in your favor. The other thing I loved about your story, which I think a lot of entrepreneurs don't quite appreciate, or entrepreneurs appreciate, but wannabe entrepreneurs don't, and that is you became an entrepreneur when you got fired. So many people become entrepreneurs out of necessity, whether it's termination from a job, economy, whatever. So you had to make it happen, right?
If you're just joining us on Unlocking Moves, today's episode is brought to you as usual by HireBetter, the strategic talent partner for growth-minded entrepreneurs everywhere.
I had to, dude. I had a wife that wasn't working. She was a school psychologist. We just moved from Texas to Boston, not certified up there, and had a daughter who wasn't a year old yet. And so I had no money at all. I just bought a house 13 days before and closed on it and gutted half of it, 1870 Victorian house. So we had to move into it, with half the thing gutted, couldn't live in the other half. And as you said, necessity's the mother of invention,
Failure is not an option. My story is actually similar. So I was newly married with a new child, and my .com went out of business. And not that I didn't start the .com, but yeah, failure wasn't an option. Had to put food on the table for the family. I get it.
Exactly. So you do what you got to do. I mean, it's sort of my theory on bootstrapping versus outside equity too. Bootstrapped companies, in my mind, not only do the owners get to keep the ownership of it, which means they can keep the direction going the way they want. That's forget the value, but just being able to decide where you really want to go with your business. but they make better companies later because that scarcity means that we're going to put good systems in for cash management and forecasting and all the stuff. Or if we got a pot of money over here, shit, we don't care, you know?
Yeah. You know, I
Help
saw
build
you.
the discipline.
There's a couple of things you mentioned on that. One was basically the joy of being undercapitalized early, and the other was on a similar note was don't raise capital until you really know what you're building, so you don't blow through and waste the capital. So yeah, two very great tidbits.
Yep. Sometimes you need capital, certain businesses that you just, unless you just have unlimited funds personally, where you got to get outside investors. But as you said, wait, don't do it too early. Get going, have some credibility, and maintain some ownership, so you don't have to give the whole thing away.
I like it. So let me go backwards a bit because I know you started your career in a very interesting spot. You were a bike mechanic. You said at 12 and 13 years old, you were making so
Yeah.
much money, you didn't know what to do with it.
Yeah.
So, but you were there for 7 years. So you were there into college, perhaps. Tell me about what you learned being a bike mechanic in the St. Louis area.
Oh my, I learned so many things. I mean, it was I worked for 3 different owners. One was a really small shop that was in the basement of an eyeglass place. That was my first experience. There I learned things like I would take old bikes. We bought a truckload of them and take them apart, paint them, put new decals on them, and sell them for big money. And that was great. That improving and selling was sort of in my blood. I'll never forget my boss told me I was really fast at fixing flat tires. And so people would come in and I'd fix I could take the wheel off, take the tire off the rim and put the new tube in or fix it and put it back together, sometimes in like a minute and a half. You go, no, you can't do it. Way too fast. Send them away for a cup of coffee, have them come back in an hour. Otherwise, they don't understand why they're paying $1 for that.
I love it.
Anyway, I learned a lot of things, learned how to manage people. I had underling working for me at that shop, but then I went to work for a guy who had 4 Schwinn stores, and he was much more of a organized, better businessman. We had some standards that we had to maintain. We had much better merchandising, better retail locations, better everything, really, better tools. Everybody wore uniforms. It was a completely different kind of operation. And I saw how that worked. And then I went to work for a guy. I got recruited by this guy. He eventually had 10 stores, and he was a super entrepreneur. He was from Arkansas originally, a guy named Don Humphreys. And he was an economist, and he quit his job for the federal government, sold his house, did this study about where he should live. He didn't know anything about bikes either. He was just such a rational guy. He had this process. What business can I go in that's good for the environment, good for people's health, and my 3 sons can work with me? Came up with the bike business. Then where do I live? He looked at like number of days of sunshine, fewest bike shops per capita. He came up with St. Louis. So he moves there, rents an apartment for $350 a month, takes his cash, starts this bike business, always undercapitalized. I mean, we'd be sitting there working and suddenly the lights would go up. And then you'd see the Union Electric cars shoot out of the parking lot. We just had our power cut off because Don didn't pay the bill. One of his stores, we didn't have any water because he didn't pay the bill. We had to walk across the street to the gas station if we needed to go to the bathroom.
Oh, that's awesome. That's
But he
awesome.
was an amazing marketer. This guy he would risk everything. We'd buy thousands of bikes at a time, get them cheaper than anybody else, go on the radio. I even did some radio commercials for him. And we'd have sales all weekend long, open 24 hours, rock bands playing in the parking lot. And we were just selling so many bikes, And Don was great for the extras too. He'd say to me like, Mark Zweig, he goes, I'll bet you can't sell that woman a new bicycle. You'd see some woman coming in with a flat tire on the wheel off the bike. He goes, I'll bet you dinner at Red Lobster, whatever you want. And of course, I'd sell him a bike, put the wheel in the touring stand. It's warped. Oh man, you need a new wheel. Not just that, the tire and the tube, that's going to be $35. I can sell you a brand new bike over here for $59.95. The kid's like, I want the new bike, mommy.
Oh, that's awesome. So, hey, what I love about that is you've got three different owners, three different perspectives. You got things you learned along the way, which I want to come back to because I think there's so much that to be learned for people starting their own careers, what they can learn along the way, even if they think it's a dead end job or whatever.
Yes.
And in fact, you write about some of these things in your book. Let me open to one of the end chapters says how to find success in your first job, which is very appropriate timing because I can't tell you the number of recent college grads or people looking for their first job. I get a reach out from their parents and I give some of the same tips and advice, which I'm sure you do at this time of year, especially as well.
Just had coffee with a girl last night before class. Same question.
And they're probably looking for like things. How can I become the next CEO? What the real advice is, just get started and learn along the way and learn the same shit you just talked about in your first three jobs. Like how to be maybe organized, how to market your company or product better, how to be a good employee.
Oh man, I'm telling you, I tell my students, Kurt, and you know how important this is. Just be the fastest person on returning emails, texts, and phone calls. You do that and you will stand out. There's just so many things people can do. Don't ever say that's not in my job description to anybody. Okay. If they ask you to do it, go do it,
You also have learn first, suggest later. So come in, learning how things operate before you start making suggestions.
Yes.
Put in FaceTime.
Yep.
Show up, especially for folks in a virtual environment. Go to the office or get a job with an office. You're going to learn a lot more and form relationships.
Yeah, everybody says they want to work remote, and yeah, it's great. You can get up and be in your jammies or whatever. No commute. But is that the best for your career?
Not to start. Find something where you can come in and be around the water cooler, and you're going to get ahead a lot faster. I promise you that.
Yep, I think so.
Okay. So I want to go through one more thing you mentioned earlier back, open book management, and it's also in your book. And I don't know if you know this, but about 2 months ago, I had Bo Burlingham on my podcast. Bo is the author. He was the author of.
I know Bo.
It was the Great Game of Business that has open book. Yeah.
Yeah. I know Bo. He used to be at Inc. magazine years ago when I was in Boston. That's how I got acquainted with the guy originally. Great guy. And they're big advocates of that open book.
Yep. So tell me about why you love open book so much and how you leveraged it at Zweig Group.
Well, I mean, I try to do it anywhere that I'm involved with if possible, but it builds trust with the employees for management because they know you're not hiding anything. We share everything. This is what we did cash wise. This is accrual. This is how much cash we got. This is the trends on inquiries, web hits, sales, whatever. Okay, whatever the metrics are, share them. It then teaches people how the business operates. So you actually have some depth in the ranks there of people that understand the business. So they trust you more. They understand the business better. That's better if you ever want to get out of it or to have continuity if people, get sick or whatever. There's just so many advantages to it. And it's baffling to me how many owners are afraid to do it. If you don't do it, people, I don't want them to see how much money I make, then they'll all want more or whatever. If you're making money, they think you're making 20 times the money that you are. Okay. And they will behave according to what they think. So they're
making the story up in their head anyway. So you might as well tell them the truth.
Exactly.
Hey, two things that I love about that. Number one is you're creating an owner mentality amongst your team. And so they feel every nickel is a nickel less than they might have an opportunity to get part of as far as profit share. And the other is, as I understand it, you have after you bought the company back from private equity, you since are in the process of maybe selling it in the ESOP or selling it to employees. Tell me a little bit about
just an internal sale back to the company, and then the other partners owned it through reverse deletion.
Okay, all right, so, but they're former employees, and they learned a lot through open book management, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was one of the first things the private equity firm stopped. And then of course they eventually tanked and their lender had the company. That's when they called me back and it was a fragment of what it once was. We had like we went from, I don't know, I think they had 120 or 130 employees at peak to like 19 people. And they weren't necessarily the 19 best. The products were all horrible. Everything was horrible. But that was one of the first things they did is they threw the open book out and got rid of the shared bonus program and made everybody on their own plan. Well, that's smarter. There's more accountability like that. Bullshit. Okay. There's total lack of cooperation when you do that. And, like the seminar people needed the consultants to be their speakers. And the consultants needed to do that because that generated revenue for them. And it just went through the whole thing. Absolutely idiotic. So yeah, we reinstated that. When I got back there, we owed everybody money. It was crazy. One of the first people I hired was my future wife. And of course, she had to deal with every call from everybody we owed money to. We had like 400,000 to this hotel, 500,000 to this printer. It was just the company it had $7 million in debt and $1 million in assets.
Ouch.
Okay, just to give you a sense. I mean, that far upside down. But anyway, she dealt with all that, and we paid everybody off that we made deals with them. We paid them off. Some cases we even had judgments against us for moving out of office space in the middle of the night that nobody contested, and she still got that reduced from like 366 to 150K, and we paid it in 2-year installments. But if we were late by 1 minute, then the whole 366 would be due. Anyway, we got through all that, and the other thing was sending out email. So by then email was the lifeblood of the place. And of course I heard from everybody, oh, you can't send. I'd be like, how many emails are sent? Or sending out one. I'm like, one? Are you crazy? You bought anything at Gap or Banana Republic or Athleta lately? They'll send you 3 emails a day from that point on. Okay. Why do they do that? Because it works. Yeah, but I got a complaint. This old client called me up and said, you're sending me too many emails. Yeah, but 25 other people bought our shit that day. Who are you going to listen? Let's stop it all now, okay? Because one guy gripes. That is very common thinking.
That is absolutely common. I love that counsel too, man. Why listen to the one naysayer? You're getting positive vibes from the other 90%.
I mean, so we had like the lender that's still on the company, like, you're going to ruin the company. You're going to ruin the list. Everybody said that to me. And I'm like, you know what? We'll be out of business in 2 weeks if we can't sell a whole lot of shit fast. So turn out the emails. I don't even care. Okay. And it worked. It's the bottom line, and I go through this all the time. Honestly, Kurt, it's like companies don't do what they know they need to do. And they just accept that. It's like, well, Sue over there, she's the one that's responsible for selling the widgets. And, Sue, we told Sue send out an email once a day on widgets. And, she's only sending out like 3 a day now. Why is that? I don't know. We used to send out 1 every day, but now, well, look at our sales. When we kicked it up to 1 a day, we doubled our sales. Now our sales are flat. Okay. Well, it's like, this isn't brain surgery over here.
Well, a lot of people who aren't entrepreneurs have that order taker mentality, and they think it's just, they want someone to tell them what to do. And then they're going to doubt what you tell them what to do. So speaking of characters, you mentioned Susie. Let's talk just briefly about my book, Who's Your Mike? I know you have your own autographed version of that. I'm
yes, I do.
Disappointed that it's not in your frame right now, but
oh, I'm sorry, Kurt. I should have grabbed it off the bookcase.
It's all good. It's all
I'm
good.
in my office. It's upstairs. It's got prime viewing though on the.
Perfect. Well, just so my audience remembers, it's a book about the different employees you're going to have on your entrepreneurial journey. Mike is the title character. He's your bookkeeper turned accountant turned controller turned CFO, and now he's in over his head and he doesn't know what to do. So the question is, who's your Mike? So Mark, who's your favorite character? I know we talked earlier about Harry the Hustler.
Well, Harry the Hustler's a good one. The other one's the Silver Bullet guy.
Pipeline Paul.
Yeah. We're going to go hire the outsider who's the hot shit salesperson, and they're going to be our cure-all. I can't tell you how many times I've seen that. in companies, they go through this sort of schizophrenic process. It's like, we're going to use who we have. Okay, after 2 or 3 years, that didn't work. Now we're going to go get the silver bullet Paul, okay? And then we'll try Paul. And then it takes us like 2 years, though, to figure out that Paul's not going to work out. Every time it's the same thing. We pay the guy 200 grand a year. He spends 100,000 on travel, meals, entertainment. We do that for 2 years. We give him a car, whatever. And then, oh, dang, he really never delivers, okay? Just like you said, it's always around the corner. Well, I got a really big meeting with somebody over at the FDOT next week. I'm really, but it never bears fruit. And then they go back to this, we're going to use who we have. And they try that for 2 or 3 years. It's this schizophrenic approach. That's why, honestly, I've always been a big fan of marketing versus selling. Selling's easy when the marketing's good, okay? Selling is a matter of order taking. I like that. So I don't need Paul or Harry, truthfully, either one of them, because my problem with the Harrys of the world is, or your superstars, they demand their pound of flesh. So I remember when we got this business back, one of the first things we did, I had a guy named Eric Howerton. He's a very successful entrepreneur, and he's my partner in our podcast, Big Talk About Small Business. Eric was my COO at that time. We bought our magazines back that used to be part of our company. It was doing 3.4 million in revenue the year before. We paid 165,000 for it. Okay. We had to cut everything. I mean, we lost like 120 grand the first month. The revenue was just plummeting. Print advertising, dying faster than you can imagine, a horrible business to be in. But anyway, we had one guy who was a sales guy, and he was the Harry, okay? He sold everything, and we paid this guy. In fact, I had to take a pay cut after 2 months of coming back. I cut my own pay down to like 40% because the company couldn't afford to pay me. And this guy was making probably 300K, I would guess, somewhere around that a year. And he was our Harry. Being dependent on him was absolutely terrible. We could not manage him. He would not do anything you told him to do. And eventually we figured out the way he sold so much was he gave away everything to get the sale. Once we started making all insertion orders be reviewed before they could be sent out, that was the key. That was the end, beginning of the end of that guy. But anyway, my point is that the really, really great salespeople, A, you're dependent on them, because if they leave, you're in trouble. And B, they demand their pound of flesh. They cost a lot. I like marketing.
I like what you said there. Is marketing the business generates enough buzz so that you have incoming calls, and especially in your business and my business, which is professional services, and we're selling something that not many people, they all need, but they don't really want, if that makes sense. And so to have an outside, just someone pounding the phones, calling people to buy on a call like that is pretty slim. But if you have the thought leadership and the marketing and the relationships, that leads to calls coming in. I like that.
Yeah, you're in a better negotiating posture too. You're not going to give the store away to get the job. You can, it's just the whole psychology. And then the psychology of the relationship's better because you're not down here and they're here. You can actually tell them what to do and maybe they'll listen to you and then they'll be successful. And then you've got them for life. That's the whole dynamic changes when they're calling you instead of you calling them. I say this as somebody, Kurt. I mean, I don't know about you were in the recruiting business. I know, right? At one point,
yep.
I was taught like pound away. It's like make 100 phone calls today, get through to 50 people. It was like numbers. We had to cold call all our work was cold calls. You never got a job come across the transom. So I learned how to do it. I could do it. I was good at it. I didn't like it. I didn't feel great about it, but I did it because I did what I was told. I worked for a guy who was originally national sales manager of Xerox, and then he was a management recruiters franchise owner. And I'm, MRI, they had a real training program.
I think making cold calls is foundational for everybody's career. We all should learn how to do it. Yep. but it doesn't mean that that's what we need to be doing for the rest of our career. But it is good lessons to learn for sure.
Man, that's so true. Because one of my daughters is a recruiter for Korn Ferry, and they're a retained mucky muck search
Yep.
firm. She works on like deans of medical schools. It's the greatest assignments, non-contingent, huge fees, long time to fill the job. It's like it's a recruiter's paradise. But she started out working at a contingency firm. And, she asked me, like, should I do, and she had no qualifications for it, but her girlfriend did it and she made a lot of money. She went to high school with, this girl. So she goes, I said, you know what, Anna, if nothing else, you will learn so much from this experience.
Yep.
Super high failure rate, but you will learn. And she didn't fail, and look at where it's got her today.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, hey, so we're at the part of the show, Mark, where I want to ask people their unlocking move or moves, which again is a key pivotal moment or decision point that really changed the trajectory of your life or your career. What do you think one of your moves may have been?
Well, I think my move was selling my company the first time when I was, I guess I was 40, how old would I have been? 45, 46 years old, and changing my life and moving on to a completely different life. I moved from Boston to Fayetteville. I had a new spouse at that point in time, which, contributed to it, but that wasn't necessarily the driver. I wanted to change my life. Life's too short to do the same thing your whole life. Just because you're good at it and you make money at it doesn't mean you got to keep doing it. And I think it was really good for me. I've developed a lot since then, in other ways that I think make me a better person and better business person. A lot more diverse. I'm not just locked into one industry. A lot of different businesses, and the teaching is the greatest job in the world because it forces you to stay current and learn. Last night, Kurt, I tell you, I had the best class this semester. I've got 3 sections of my small enterprise management class, and they do a project on a small business where they study it using any number of different ways, and then they identify the issues, very broad-based, and then come up with recommendations to increase revenue, increase profit, increase the value of the business, and reduce risk. And my students just did an amazing job. I mean, I sent them all a thank you note today. I'm like, I've never had such consistently good reports as these guys did at presentations. I was blown away. I mean, and then we also, as a part of the project, they have to tell us what the owner said when they gave them the recommendations. But I mean, that's so rewarding. It's taken me a long time, I think, to refine my act over there and get better at that.
Hey, Mark, you can't leave me hanging. What did the owner say about the recommendations?
Listen, most of them were very positive. If they weren't, they're just people who don't want to change. I mean, they just did such a great job. But most of them, I've had owners call me and say, thank you for having my students do this project. It changed my life. I had this one guy call me one day because I can't believe it. He goes, I've had this business for 15 years. I was basically burnt out, depressed, thought I'm never going to make any more money than I am. He goes, your 2 students came in here. They turned the whole thing on its end. We changed our name. We changed our branding. He goes, I'm already making more money. Eventually, one of my students invested in that business, became one of his partners.
Dude, that is beautiful. I'm so jealous of what you're doing. You're a professor, or I guess I call it professor, entrepreneur in residence, University of Arkansas in the entrepreneurship program. You're getting some rave reviews. So my research team went to ratemyprofessor.com, and they said that he is, quote, the best professor at the university, and recommend him highly to anyone interested in business or life in general. Holy shit, dude. That's amazing.
Well, I was lucky. I don't know. Maybe I paid them off to give me that review, but no, I'm really lucky that, I mean, the Walton College is a great organization. I mean, we're so lucky to be here. We've got so many great contributors between all the successful entrepreneurs, the Walton Foundation, the Tysons, the JB Hunt, and others have made us very well funded, and they're very open here. It's not, nobody tries to control me or mandate that I do things a certain way. And I am super grateful for that. I mean, in some ways, Kurt, it's the greatest job you could ever have. Nobody works for you. There's there's no management. If I ever had a gripe, I go to my department chair and go, "This is the greatest feeling ever. I'm usually on your side of the desk. You have to listen to me now."
That's awesome. You got no clients you have to mess around with. That's awesome. Hey,
That's great.
speaking of Walton College, it is a great business school, one of the top, I think, in the U.S. And I want to tell you, I don't mean to brag, Mark, but you may know that I'm a graduate of the Walton College at University
I
of
do.
Arkansas, and I was just 2 points shy of a 4.0 average. So
Damn.
just high end.
So you're saying you had a 2.0 or a 3.98?
Yeah, how do you want to interpret that, Mark? Use your. By the way, if my brother ever steals that line, it's my line. He can't steal it.
Listen, Kurt, in fact, this young woman I had coffee with before class yesterday, I asked her what her GPA was. She said 3.3, sort of sheepishly. I said, "That's great." I said, because she had like 5 jobs and still, I'm like, "You got a 3.3, you worked, you got all this experience. I would love to hire you if I had a job." Okay. I mean,
That's
honestly, in some ways, when they got a 4.0, a lot of times they maybe don't have some other skills that would be helpful.
I couldn't agree more, Mark. And you're speaking my language. Now, I did have my own business in college, so I was an entrepreneur in college, which contributed to my C average. But you know what? I'm still proud that I got a degree. How about that?
Well, you know what? And nobody cares about your grades once you're out. I
Very
always tell them
true.
that.
Very true.
It's what get out of it. Try to learn. The one thing it does bother me though, when students don't take advantage of all the resources and opportunities, like guest speakers that we have and art exhibits or chances to go somewhere else and see how they're doing things, embrace all that. Don't just go through the motions and get your ticket punched so you can go to work at Megacorp and then too quickly buy a house you shouldn't be buying and 2 new cars and get married. And now you're hooked up forever, you know?
So,
I
hey, I mentioned before the show, but this is going to go into my spot specifically for recent college grads or college students about tips for life. So, thank you for that. Unprompted.
Well, that's good because I mean, I made all those mistakes myself, by the way. So it's like,
So, hey, Mark, I consider myself the listener's advocate. And if I've got Mark in a one-on-one conversation, what would I want Kurt to ask? And the question I came up with was, it feels like you've got an unhealthy obsession. As I understand it, you've owned over 400 cars and 300 motorcycles in your life. And you're also currently an investor and CFO for Janus Motorcycles. What's your
Yeah.
problem?
I don't know. It is like an illness. I mean, honestly, I was sending my wife motorcycles off Facebook Marketplace today. I'm like, "Look at this, honey. It's a great buy." Same thing with RVs. Last night I was like, "Gosh, do we need this giant diesel pusher RV we have? It's a great one. It's great quality. Maybe we should have a smaller one." I don't know what it is, Kurt. It's a disease, but I like cars and bikes from the time I was a little kid. And I love design. And no one vehicle does everything that you want it to do. So that's how you can rationalize waking up one day and having 10 or 15 or 20 cars and 10 or 15 or 20 bikes in your garage. It's like, I need that bike for this purpose. But it does become a trap, honestly, all that stuff. I've really shed most of that today. And I just, I've got my nice modern generation 911 Carrera Cabriolet, perfect car as far as I'm concerned. Doesn't break down. It's fast. It looks good. It's good quality. Handles great. All-wheel drive. Perfect vehicle. I don't need anything else. I'm going to try not to look at anything else and rationalize that I need it. I do need some more bikes, though. I've got a new Janus on order that's going to be a sort of a new experiment for us, and hopefully a new model that'll be a vastly improved version of our 250 dual sport that I'm really excited about. I can't wait to see it get built. And I don't need anything big anymore. I don't ride bikes that far, so I've had them all.
I'm guessing that's why you're an investor and an officer at Janus, and so you can get first dibs on the bikes off the production line.
Yeah, that's it. No, the guys there are great. It's been a whole learning experience for me getting into manufacturing, and it has its unique challenges and opportunities as well. But it's a great American company. We were named the coolest thing made in Indiana in 2021 or 2022. We have some really talented artisans and craftsmen. You got a guy that makes fenders all day. All these guys and gals. We have a woman who does hand pinstriping, super talented. Most of them were artists or musicians. Didn't really know anything about manufacturing or business, which is, it's kind of a problem, but it's also an opportunity. So
I love that. I love that. On that note, we're going to wrap this puppy up. Thanks for joining me on Unlocking Moves. For all my audience out there, please go like and subscribe wherever you consume your podcasts. And Mark, this has been an absolute blast. I can't wait to see you in Fayetteville and really appreciate you coming on Unlocking Moves.
Well, Kurt, I'm so grateful that your brother introduced us, and you really are a great host of this show and have such a positive attitude. And thank you for all you're doing out there for the aspiring and current business owners. I know it's very valuable that you give back like this.
Back at you, brother. Back at you. If you're an entrepreneur and you think you might have outgrown a member of your team, or maybe you've got a mic, as we talked about in Who's Your Mic, check out this quiz at who'syourmic.com/quiz. That's who'syourmic.com/quiz.